that seems to be unfashionable in Washington. We need to think about winning this worldwide war. We need to understand that every week that goes by, there are more young people recruited into Al-Qaeda and into the various Iranian terrorist organizations. We just saw a video of a 12-year-old in Pakistan beheading a man. So let me start with this. Here's what happens, and this is what, frankly, the Congress does to people. You have a freely elected democratic government in Colombia waging a campaign, but it's a tough campaign. So the president of Colombia, democratically elected president, becomes persona non grata. Al Gore won't even appear with him on the same stage because the tone of the government's inappropriate, okay? So if we were to pull out of Iraq and you suddenly had the chaos that Tim described, the next battle cry would be cut off the funding because the pro-American side would end up doing things that were, quote, inappropriate. And then you'd say, well, if only somebody perfect were in charge with a perfect government. Now, let me point out, this is a Democratic Congress which has not passed a single one of Nancy Pelosi's 100-hour 6 items. Not a single one's gone into law. It's a Democratic Congress which in its first 4 months has passed 26 bills, 12 of which are renaming federal buildings. And I think to set one standard for the Iraqi parliament and a totally lower standard for the American government after 225 years of practice is fundamentally flawed. Either we are for our allies winning, we should do what it takes for our allies to win, we should actually be in the attitude of winning the war, which we did in less than 4 years in World War II, or we should recognize after 5.5 years from 9/11, we are in fact on a worldwide basis slowly, gradually losing the fight against terrorism and the fight against dictatorship.
But specifically, how would you win the war in Iraq militarily?
First of all, you would empower General Petraeus. You'd pass the supplemental immediately. You'd give him the money. Second, you would encourage the Iraqis to triple the size of their regular army. Third, you would encourage the development of a military tribunal system to lock people up the way Abraham Lincoln would have done it. Fourth, you would establish a nationwide ID card with biometrics so you can actually track everybody in the country. Fifth, you would make sure that the State Department actually staffed the embassy with people in favor of winning the war, and you actually had your fully equipped intelligence and economic development teams. Sixth, you would say to the Iranians, if you don't cut off everything you're doing, we'll begin to bring enormous pressure to bear with you, if necessary, blockading the flow of gasoline into Iran, which has to import 40% of its gasoline because it only has one refinery in the entire country. So I would lean forward and say to the world, we are, by George, going to make sure that the allies of America and the forces of freedom win, and we are the most powerful nation in history, and we have more than enough assets to do this, and we ought to do what it takes to win, not tolerate legislating defeat.
Well, you know, what you're suggesting, first of all, it's terribly naive to assume that all of these things are going to happen with a government that even to this day can't even leave the green zone to get out and function. I just met with some soldiers at Walter Reed a few weeks ago, and listening to them, young Americans coming back, and to quote them almost exactly, Tim, we'll go in and we'll spend a month and a half securing an area here. And these are young men very proud of this service, by the way. Go into an area, secure it, take a month and a half to do it, and to quote him, an hour and a half after we leave, it's right back where it was. And Senator said, they know where the IEDs are, they know where the ammo dumps are, and they won't even tell us where they are today. You've got almost 80% of the population of that country thinks we're the source of their chaos. The majority in the parliament called for a date certain for us to leave. $2 billion a week, $8 billion a month, and exactly the point Newt is making, I agree with you. The war on terror is the legitimate war. We're building an army of radicals and a generation coming along as a result of the legitimacy of the effort engaged in Iraq. The former Commandant of the Marine Corps made that point in an op-ed piece in the Washington Post last week here. We're losing that particular area, Newt. You cannot continue here having this succeed in here with these countries literally expanding their opportunities. We're bogged down in this matter. The war on terror is being neglected. We don't have enough troops in Afghanistan. The Taliban is resurgent here. Pakistan seems to be weak on the issue here. All of our attention. The president goes to Latin America. He almost has to hide out for a week and a half. He's losing a public relations battle of Hugo Chavez. This is incredible to me. And literally a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's no willingness to consider alternatives in a different mission in Iraq. If we have a different mission, if you'd listen to your military commanders, listen to the diplomatic people, listen to Jim Baker and Lee Hamilton in their report, which I know you were highly critical of, but frankly, their suggestions make a lot of sense to people here.
Well, there are two fundamental differences here. The first is the Baker-Hamilton Commission suggested that we engage Iran and Syria, who are our enemies in the region. The fact is the Iranians want us defeated. The Iranians are providing weapons, training, and money to defeat us. The idea that the answer is, this would be like saying, why don't we turn to Nazi Germany to help us manage fascist Italy? But let me say a second thing. I reject totally the idea that the Iraqi campaign is at the heart of the war on terror. The Iranians killed American Marines in Lebanon when we weren't in Iraq. The Iranians killed Americans in Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia when we weren't in Iraq. Al-Qaeda bombed 2 U.S. embassies when we were in Iraq. Al-Qaeda bombed Yemen when we weren't in Iraq. Al-Qaeda bombed New York City when we weren't in Iraq. We are in a war against people both on the Shia side, funded by the Iranians, and on the Sunni side, largely funded by the Saudis, who are determined to destroy freedom as we know it. We have yet to come to engage in how serious this is. We have yet to mobilize. I want to repeat this. We won the entire Second World War in less than 4 years after Pearl Harbor. We're now 5.5 years into this war. We are rope-a-doping. We are playing domestic political games. And I'm not in any way defending the Bush administration. We have no grand strategy. We have no sense of mobilization of national will. And I think someplace down the road, we are in grave danger of losing 1 or more American cities to a nuclear or biological attack. And we ought to take it seriously now,
Well, I agree
not
with that.
afterwards.
Listen, I'm taking it seriously. And